Welcome, Ashish. It's great to have you with us. We're really excited to talk to you today. You've just launched a new company. The company's called The Happiness Squad, and you've also written a new book. The new book is called Hardwired for Happiness. Now, obviously, happiness is clearly a pursuit and a goal for millions of people all around the world. But on the other side, there are so many people that talk about, is happiness in fact realistic? Is this a realizable goal? So I'd love to explore that more with you today. Why happiness, and what's brought you to this point in your career and your life?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for having me, Anna and Neil, on live with you. Look, it's my pleasure, and I'm so excited about this topic, right? Because as you said, right, if you think about anything we do, almost everything can be boiled down to, we do it because it makes us happy, right? We don't necessarily do anything because it makes us unhappy. Even when we actually go through things that might be harder, right? Like I have to study really hard for an exam. In the end, I'm doing it because I have a story that if I succeed, if I study hard, I succeed, I'm going to get a good job, I'm going to make money, I'm going to be happy, right? So we're always, as you said, pursuing happiness. And it's oftentimes at the base of almost everything that we do. But the reason for writing this book and kind of joining in this conversation with so many other leaders who are addressing this is, we teach kids, we teach leaders, right, how to do things, how to kind of study accounting and business. We don't actually teach people how to be happy. And part of it because we say, well, it's a very individual thing. But there is a science behind happiness. And there's a science behind why we actually are often unhappy and why we are constantly pursuing. And one of the themes I constantly hit on is that you can never actually pursue happiness. In fact, those who pursue happiness are oftentimes unhappier. Happiness is something that actually ensues by actually living a virtuous life, by actually living a life coherent with these 9 practices that I cover in the book. I came to these 9 practices basically from, around 450 different books and my own research that I did across different fields, from spirituality and ancient wisdom traditions to psychology and neurosciences, right? And that's through all of that is where I found these actually practices that are proven to actually rewire our brains, hence the word rewired for happiness. And at Happiness Squad, my goal is to help people integrate these into their lives.
So, Ashish, I think, it seems like it's a catch-22. If you're pursuing happiness, like you said, you're not necessarily going to achieve it. For those who are watching this and like, look, it's hard to be happy 24/7. What do you tell those people? I mean, obviously everyone wants to be happy, but is that realistic to be happy at all times?
Great question, Neil. Another very common myth that I often come into, right, is happiness means we are happier and life is all about unicorns and rainbows and no, life has suffering, right? In fact, that was one of the core teachings of Buddha, where he said, look, life has suffering. Suffering is a part of life. It's about how we actually navigate those hardships. And these practices don't necessarily put us in a forever happy state, but what they can help us is to be happier no matter what we are actually surrounding ourselves in. Right? There's a beautiful saying that one of my teachers told me, right? If you think about boats in storms, right? Boats very rarely drown because of the water around them. Boats drown because of the water that gets in them.
Right.
And so these practices around how do we actually build ourselves? How do we actually build our own resilience so that regardless of what's out there, we can actually float, we can actually surf versus drown.
Absolutely. And I think your book's coming out at such an important time in the world. And you and I have both worked for many years across many global organizations, and we've seen this as a real issue where people are turning up, they're clearly unhappy, and they really lack substantial meaning in the work that they do. So how do you see this work translating into organizations who are often quite rigid places and don't often allow this type of conversation to occur?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, I run into this often, right? As you can imagine, there are two questions that I often get as I engage with organizations. The first question is, great, we're all in for happiness. Why do I care? Right? The second is, happiness is subjective. Everybody's definition of happiness is different. And so, how can I help? Right? Two questions. And my answer to them, Anna, is the following. I'm basically, the big message for me is, for any leaders today, employee flourishing, creating environments where employees can flourish, they can be happy, it's frankly not a choice. You need it at the very least as a defensive move. And if you actually really do want to, you can be on the offensive and make it into a competitive strategy. So let me explain why. From a defensive point of view, if any executive team steps back, look, this is what we are swimming in. As executive teams, our targets have never been higher. Never been higher. Our operating conditions have never been harder, right? Supply chains are disrupted. Inflation is right now out of control. Customer demand has fundamentally shifted. We're still coming out of the pandemic, trying to make sense of this flexible remote work. We have a war going on. We have ecological disasters. We have shootings still at an ever increasing rate across the states. And so if you think about all of that, hard supply chain disruptions, this is a moment where you want people to show up. You want your employees to show up engaged. You want them to lean into the work. You need solutions that are more creative, because the problems we're tackling are not the problems of the past. And yet at this moment, almost 2.5, 3 years, into the pandemic and getting out of it, employees are exhausted and burnt out. 40 to 60% burnouts are what you're seeing. We also have highest level of attrition, right? So I say, as a defensive strategy, at the very least, how are you planning to deliver your goals? If your people aren't excited, don't believe in the business, they feel this is just a way to earn a paycheck, they are not rushing in, right? So defensively, I'm like, you've got to figure out a way to engage. You got to figure out a way for people to grow and kind of find meaning in what they're doing. Again, these are all the elements that make us happy. I'm doing work which is meaningful. I'm working with friends. I know people have my back. I'm actually doing work where I'm not left completely exhausted when I go home to my families, to my friends. And by the way, I'm not able to make decisions, right? And by the way, if there is conflicts, which are in any relationships, I can actually work through them. Yeah. Offensively, right? If you look at the data from, Professor Jan Emanuel at Oxford, or the work done when he did at Warwick or at Harvard, the data is quite clear. Companies that actually have happier employees have twice the stock market returns. They have 20% plus profitability, 20% plus productivity, 3 times higher creativity, and 65% lower attrition, right? That's the data. I mean, it's across the best places to work. Gallup's validated the same data. And so I say, listen, yes, you can invest in the latest technology. You can invest in the latest gadget. Why not invest in a culture of human flourishing? Why not teach our people leaders the skills to turn those who actually come to work for you into one of your biggest assets?
Yeah, I think meaning and purpose is so vital to a company's health, and hit the nail on the head there. I know Anna, with Newmanity, has done such great work in helping companies, really find that purpose among their staff and teach that, because that ultimately affects the bottom line, doesn't it? I mean, it's not just
100%.
Yeah, you don't just want to see your employees shut their laptops at the end of the day. I also, heard a lot of people talking about this quiet quitting, and it's something that Kevin O'Leary, of Shark Tank, had said recently, where if your employees are quietly quitting, that's probably the worst thing for your business, because people are shutting down at the end of the day. They're not working for you. They're thinking about their exit. And so that's got to be something that goes to the core of the business. I mean, probably, would you consider that like a top 3, goal for a business, is to have that health within a company?
100%, Neil. 100%, right? Look, I think quiet quitting is a trend. right? It is a lot. It's really trending out there. People are talking about it. But look, employee engagement scores have been low forever, right? I think Gallup's been talking around 25, 30% engagement scores forever, including 20% that are actively disengaged, right? Those numbers are out there. Now it's actually getting further exacerbated now. But that's where, I think that is the crux. And it comes because you realize, people start taking their work as just a job, right? I'm not really enjoying it. I find it draining. And so I'm actually disengaging. And the problem is even bigger than that, Neil. So it's one thing if people say, look, I'm going to be here from 8 to 5. And after that, I'm not really willing to engage. The bigger issue is even when they are at a place between 8 to 5, they're only 30% there, right? When you are in a mood of resentment, for example, you don't like where you are. Do you show up as your whole self? Do you really engage? No, you're not at your best. And so this is about actually really making sure when people show up. I mean, this is about, I would, through our work, Anna, this is the work that you're doing. I mean, what I hope is we actually change the words. Thank God it's Friday to thank God it's Monday. I'm excited. I want to show up. I'm with my friends. We're actually making a difference. I'm learning. I'm growing. And by the way, anybody can have that, right? And I think that's a key skill, I feel. There's a lot of work going on connecting company purpose to individual purpose. And I think the missing link is that's great. But what we also need to do is when we show up in our day-to-day as a team, if I'm a procurement team, or if I'm a product development team, or if I'm a factory worker, is my day-to-day work meaningful to me personally? How can I help as a leader find that individual, whether it's a frontline worker, a store employee, an R&D engineer, or an executive, find meaning in what they're doing every day? That's magic. And if you can do that, you unlock performance, people show up, right? And they're engaged.
Yeah. I mean, this is such important work. And like you say, the evidence is there, the data's there to support it. And I guess I'm just wondering, at what level do you go into the organization with this? Because from my experience, there are so many executives and CEOs who intellectually understand that this is so important, but they're still not willing to embrace the change within themselves. And until it actually shows up in their leadership, in their behaviors, in their mindset and attitude, it can just be writing on the wall versus actually, something that's entrenched and ingrained within the organization that fundamentally creates change. Do you experience this, and have you experienced this in your work, Ashish? I mean, I feel like this is one of the fundamental problems, is how we actually really truly inspire these top leaders to change. And if they aren't going to change, how do we isolate them and have the rest of the organization move with it?
I love that question, Anna, and it's so true. You and I have seen so many places, right? Beautiful words on the walls, but are we really living into that purpose? Are we living into that mission? Right? That is at the heart of it. Absolutely. And look, I don't have the silver bullet for it, but I do know it actually starts from an experience. We can't tell people to do behaviors. We have to fundamentally help them experience the difference in their own lives, right? So as I do this work, I always say, look, you don't need to do this as a whole organization, right? For this to work, one answer is start at the top of the house, do this work with the leaders, and then cascade it all the way through, right? That is kind of the perfect solution. But in our messy world, we don't have space for perfect, right? We don't have time for perfect. Those opportunities are few and far in between. So at the core of it, what you can start with is a conscious leader. A conscious leader who hasn't read about this, but who has experienced the power of meaning by a personal transformation in their own life, right? And so a big part of this work that I'm excited to bring into the world is to actually have an academy where we can actually take leaders and get them to experience it in their own context, so that they can actually take this into the teams they lead, and those teams can then cascade it to the next level. Yeah. The other thing that is really important about this is I fundamentally believe, our leadership trainings, our retreats don't work because you have to do this work in the context of day to day, how to get things done, people just don't remember those trainings. They can be one-off amazing experiences, but we very quickly snap back to reality when we show up to our work labs. And they have to be a journey, right? We have to recognize at the core of this, we're talking about a fundamental transformation. If you look at any transformations around us in nature, they don't happen overnight. They take time. And so I also fundamentally believe that this work, we need to give it 6, 9, 12 months. We have to live it every day. We have to be compassionate to recognize that there is some moments, the worst side of us, the other side of us, the scared side of us is going to come up. But we also need the ability to be able to recognize it, be able to step back and continue down the growth path, right? One step back is okay, as long as we're willing to take 2 steps forward the next day.
Ashish, let me ask you, for the past 17 years about at McKinsey, you've really helped a lot of leadership teams undergo major transformations. So I'm curious if you can give us an example of one of those transformations that, led to substantial growth within a company.
Yeah. So look, I had the good fortune over the last 2 years to actually, as the pandemic was unfolding, I was in the leadership service line at the firm. And over the last 2 years, we actually had the opportunity to build a program. It was our adaptability and resilience program, and actually test it across multiple clients, in large transformation settings, right? And this was all around adaptability and resilience. So I would say, close cousin to happiness and human flourishing. Because, we developed this program because we had recognized that in parallel to the pandemic, there was going to be a mental health crisis that was going to be unfolding, right? And we needed the ability to actually help people build psychological resilience. We actually worked with a large company. It was a pharmaceutical company. We actually deployed the work across, it was a global team, about 500 people. And then we also deployed a digital journey that touched 50,000 people. And what we could see is over 9 to 12 months, for those who engaged and those who showed up, we actually could improve all of those elements that create human flourishing in organizations. Psychological safety went up, well-being scores went up, the effectiveness of leaders went up, not just reported by themselves, but actually reported by their peers and those that worked for them. Right? And so it's very much possible. I think this work is a lived possibility for so many, but it does need those elements, right? This has to live in the context of the day-to-day work. It has to be a journey. We do need to be reminded constantly through nudges of being able to take the actions we need to be able to take. And we need to hold the whole space with compassion and kindness. To support ourselves, but more importantly, to support others, right? I always say you can't be compassionate if you're self-compassionate. And that's one of the biggest issues I run into. Leaders are so hard on themselves. And they feel that if they say, I don't know, they are a failure. No, in today's world that we're navigating, it's a core skill to actually, from a place of grounding, be able to lean into the team and say, I don't know. Let's work through it together.
No one knows everything, Ashish.
But I have to tell you, this was it's been so amazing, So we did a series of, as you can imagine, right? There were so many people who were calling us, asking us questions about, what do you think is the right answer? What's your expert opinion? And Neil, I can tell you how many times I was like, it's my first pandemic too. I don't know. We're swimming in this together, right? Let's figure it out.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, spot on. I think people respect that. You can see it in sports too, when some players after the game, they say, they make something up, and then you have others that say, look, I made a mistake, or I didn't know what the rule was, and I think that people can relate.
Yeah. And also because, Neil, this is such a personal transformation as we go back, right, Anna, to your question of how do we make this a lived reality for people. Because this is such a personal transformation, what works for Anna might not work for you. Even though I can show you, here's 1,000 people whose lives it touched. You're like, yeah, but I'm not that 1,000. I'm somebody else, right? So one of the things that I've tried to do in the book, and I'm doing the same as part of this masterclass that I'm developing that will launch in March, is, I'm actually taking the neuroscience of habit formation. I'm breaking these 9 practices I write about in things that we can do in 5 minutes or less, 4 each. And the idea is for people to actually try them, right? So over 9 months, try these practices with the hope that you will find the 6 to 9 that help you be happier. Right? In the book, what I've done is I've actually included for each practice 3 different exercises because we're all wired differently. There's an exercise which is a journaling exercise, right? For those who like to actually write, who like to set up time aside to really go inwards. I've also set up a meditation for those who don't like to write, but just like to tune inwards and they need a guide and a voice that can help them do that. And then for the third group, these are more like me, we just like to talk through things. And so what I've created is for each exercise, a coaching script that actually can be used with a partner to help you work through an obstacle you might be facing or to help you discover your meaning. And so I wanted to make this accessible, right? Because I was like, look, I didn't come up with the practices. They've been there for 2,000 plus years in every wisdom tradition. I'm also not like Tao or Sonia or Emma, who've done amazing research that show why these work, right? It all started, frankly, with even Marty Seligman's work in positive psychology. So all the research exists. What I'm trying to do is actually help people integrate this into their day-to-day lives. To me, that's make them go from knowing to doing to fundamentally changing their way of being. That's the mission. That's the purpose.
Yeah, Ashish, it sounds highly experiential versus telling people what to do. It's giving them an opportunity to experience.
That's it.
And I love the fact that you, within your model, within your 9 elements, the core fundamental element is self-awareness. You and I both know how important that is and is really the foundation for leadership. It's not a new phenomenon. It's been around since the Greek times. Know thyself. They've spoken about it for thousands of years. And often it's one of the most missing pieces in leadership when you walk into an organization. It's always quite a surprise. What's your sort of, what advice do you have for people around how they can just increase their levels of self-awareness on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, great question, Anna. And I think, so look, that is at the heart of the practice. I think if you don't have self-awareness, it is highly impossible to actually unlock any of the others.
Yeah.
Right. And look, I think there are tons of different ways in which we can increase self-awareness. I always talk about it in 3 levels. One, frankly, becoming even more aware of how we make meaning of the world is one aspect of it, right? We always see the world from a place, from certain beliefs, right, wrong, good, bad, short, long, are all based on certain assessments we hold. And the field of ontological coaching is at the heart of this work. And I trained as an ontological coach, helping people, helping ourselves become better observers of how we are making sense of the world. So I always tell people to think about 3 things that are at the core of that model. First, think about thought. So what is the belief that is helping me get to the assessment that I'm coming to, right? And is that belief just my belief based on my experience, or is that something that is shared by everybody? And if it is not, how can I test it? The second is, what mood state, what emotion am I in the midst of right now? Our moods are predispositions to action, right? They also inform our moods. If we are feeling down, it's really hard to come up with creative ideas, right? Or I'm feeling angry or feeling resentful, I can't coordinate actions with the other person. So what's the mood that's actually present right now for me? Instead of saying, I am angry, I feel anger gives me more choice to do something about it. We can also recognize that anger is going to shift. Tomorrow, an hour from now, I might not be angry. So it's okay. And the third is, what are we actually feeling in our bodies? What is the feeling? What's the sensation? And these together are forming the unique observer I am. So even just this simple practice of, let's not become just our thoughts. Let's actually tune into what we're feeling. Let's tune into what is the actual mood present. And collectively through that, think about, could we actually shift into a different pattern if the current pattern we're finding ourselves in is causing us suffering? Don't try and change the outside. First, try and change the inside. First, try and even observe the inside. And if you do that, maybe there is a possibility that opens up that gives you a different way and a different leverage point to change the outside.
Anna, I mean, I always tell people, I'm sure you can relate with your clients, control what you can control. You know, you can't control the outside, as Ashish says. And, you know, if it's out of your control, then don't try to control it because it's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. Master your inner world is a lot easier task than trying to control. Or let me put it this way. Controlling the outside is an impossible task. Master your inner world is not easy, but at least can get you to what you want to get to. Yeah.
I always like to bring it down to simple terms that life is a combination of choice and fate. We choose in every given moment, and we're dealt with the cards that we have. And if it's often these simple ways of being that bring us to this place of self-awareness, right? I mean, it's simple, but it's not easy. And the journey of self-mastery is not an easy journey. And what you're suggesting for people is quite difficult. But it's what's needed to change the face of leadership. It's what's needed to change the way that the world is positioned today with so much conflict, with so much uncertainty. And we're really excited to see how your work unfolds over the coming years.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Neil. Like, look, I mean, this is to me, right? This is a lot of people said, oh, you've got a new job. And I said, no, this is my calling. This is the work I feel called to do in the world, right? In the second, quote unquote, or the next phase of my life. This is my second mountain pouring from brooks, right? Like this is the mountain. I mean, and I think through this, if we can actually help at scale, help people rewire their brains for happiness rather than from fear and scarcity, I think we can change the world. I think we can heal the planet.
Absolutely.
Great discussion, Ashish. We appreciate it. I know it'll help a lot of people, not just leaders, but I think anyone that goes to work, to be honest.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be with both of you and appreciate you both.
Thank you, Ashish. It's been great. Really looking forward to seeing you again soon and talking more about this.
Yeah, by the way, if people want to, they can go to happiness-squad.com to know when the book comes out, where there's going to be available. I'm also posting weekly blogs, so they can get access to that as well, right? And a whole host of other resources.
Happiness-squad.com.
Happiness-squad.com.
Great.